Hey everybody, Sean from Movie Assault here, and welcome to episode 10 of the Halloween 15 for 2021. This time out, I wanted to take a look at 1992's Bram Stoker's Dracula, starring Gary Oldman, Winona Ryder, Keanu Reeves, and Anthony Hopkins, and this was directed by Francis Ford Coppola. Of course, Count Dracula is one of the most iconic and well-known characters in horror. His origin, of course, is in the Bram Stoker novel from 1897, but since then there have been countless versions of Dracula that have been fixtures in film and literature and just popular culture in general. And in most cases, it's the Bela Lugosi performance of Count Dracula from the 1931 film that informs most of those interpretations of the character. Director Francis Ford Coppola made his 1992 telling of the story, and I believe his intention was to return the image of Dracula back to the more Bram Stokery roots, hence the name of the movie, Bram Stoker's Dracula. In Coppola's telling of the story, Gary Oldman is cast as the Count. His Dracula vows to renounce God and rise from the grave when his beloved Elizabeta commits suicide after receiving a false report of the Count's death. For nearly 500 years, Dracula is tortured by the loss of his wife. But he finds sort of a new lease on being undead, rather than a new lease on life, when he meets Jonathan Harker, who's played by Keanu Reeves. Jonathan is a real estate broker who's sent to Transylvania to finalize some dealings with the Count, who's buying up some property in London. And Jonathan is engaged to marry what's her last name? I can't remember her last name, but her first name is Mina. And she is just the spitting image of Elizabeta. And after seeing her picture, Dracula imprisons Jonathan Harker in his castle and makes way to London to kind of put the moves on Mina. He's convinced it's Elizabeta reincarnated or reborn to be with him. So while Jonathan is missing in Transylvania, Mina is pursued by this strange man who does not look anything like the Dracula we saw in Transylvania, but he identifies himself as a prince. And when Mina's longtime friend Lucy, who is played by Sadie Frost, comes down with what is thought to be a disease of the blood, one of her suitors calls in Professor Abraham Van Helsing, who is played by Anthony Hopkins. And Van Helsing knows that science isn't always the answer to things like this, and he determines that she has been bitten by a Nosferatu, and Dracula is in town, and he's fully prepared to take him on. Bram Stoker's Dracula is really kind of a lavish production. It's got some really impressive sets, really ornate costumes, and some pretty damn interesting locations, and some of them, especially the ones in Transylvania, appear to be miniature effects. The makeup effects that are used to transform Oldman into his various ages and forms and shapes, they're very impressive even by today's standards. Many of the visual effects that I was talking about, the miniatures, they look kind of old school, but it gives the film kind of a timeless quality. This was made in the 90s, but it doesn't look like a 90s film. It looks fairly recent. I mean, it looks like it would, well, it does. It holds up very well against movies that are made today, but it looks different. It has this very unique look to it, which is very interesting. As far as the casting goes, Oldman is having a great time playing Count Dracula. He gets to ham it up pretty good. He seems to love the different ages that he gets to play and the different sort of roles that he takes on, because he's a warrior, he's a prince, he's an old creepy guy, all in the same movie. It's pretty interesting. But the rest of the cast is sort of a mixed bag. Anthony Hopkins is great. He has he's a riot playing Abraham Van Helsing, and there's one scene where he's just nonchalantly describing how you kill a vampire, and it's really worth seeing. But Keanu Reeves seems really out of place. His British accent sort of becomes this British surfer accent, and everybody says that about this movie because it's blatantly obvious that he's having trouble with the accent. Winona Ryder, she's interesting because she has some decent chemistry with Gary Oldman in their scenes. I guess they had some trouble behind the scenes on the set, but on film they look like they're really kind of clicking. but she doesn't seem to click with anybody else or anything else in the movie. She's sort of out of her element in other scenes, but she's really good with Oldman. And Sadie Frost, she's kind of a writhing, electric sexual being in this movie, and that's kind of the key to what distances this movie from other tellings of Dracula, aside from, say, your triple X parodies of the legend. But Coppola's take is it doesn't shy away from the more erotic aspects of the story. Dracula has always been sort of this seductive character, and the visuals here don't really hold back on depicting that sexual influence that he has over his victims. This definitely isn't your grandpa's Dracula. And this is so far removed from anything that I have seen Francis Ford Coppola do, and I'm by no means an expert on his work. But based on what I have seen, this is markedly different, and it's really impressive that it works as well as it does, being that he's trying something that seems to me to be very new for him. Sometimes the pacing does drag a bit in the second act, but I still found myself enjoying Bram Stoker's Dracula as an exercise in excess. If anything, Coppola has succeeded in creating an updated and more mature version of Count Dracula and an alternative to the Bela Lugosi version. It's not scary per se, but it does conjure up some really gruesome and horrific imagery, and I would say that it's a must-see for vampire lovers and horror fans alike, and I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. Thanks for watching. That was my review of Bram Stoker's Dracula. Stay tuned for episode 11 of the Halloween 15, which will feature scary stories to tell in the dark from 2019. Thanks for watching, everybody. Take it easy.